Hi there, thank you very much for tuning in to the video part of the puzzle questions package. In this video, I'm going to be explaining to you answers to the 9 questions that I developed. In the previous PDF, you already saw both the questions and answers, and here I'm going to be guiding you through what and explaining why the answers are what I think they are. So as you're familiar already with it, we have a nice array of different topics. We're going to be covering bubble diagrams, adjacency matrix, phasing, floor planning, and site planning. And I already wrote extensively on these puzzle questions and why they come to be so seemingly complicated when you see them, and the reason for that is primarily because there isn't really enough of practice questions. So some of you reached out already to me saying that you had the same issues on PA as I had, so the hope of this video and my effort is to just make you less afraid of these questions, because they are not so difficult as when you develop your method of resolving them. So let's start with question number 1 on the bubble diagram. So one thing that all these puzzle questions have in common is that they pretty much consist of 2 components. One is the written component, the other one is the graphic component. The way you go about resolving these questions is step number 1 is to grasp what the graphic component is about. And you pretty much do this before you start even reading the question. So in this case over here, we are looking at a bubble diagram. So first thing first, we see that there is quite a few of empty bubbles, which can get us worried, but we'll see nothing to worry about. We can see that this bubble here is connected to many other bubbles. This one over here and this one are sort of going to be point of entries or something, because as you can see, they are connected to one other bubble only. And then we can see offices, dressing room, stage, auditorium. Chances are that we're going to be dealing with a theater. And then on the left, we're going to be seeing the room names that are going to be inserted into each of these. So if we just glance through it, yep, it seems like it's going to be a theater. So what I just went through takes much longer to explain than for your brain to process it during the test. So only by doing this much, you have enough understanding to start diving into the graphic part. So let's do that. It says, an architect is working on a production theater project. Okay. Some of clients' requirements are as following. Number 1, foyer needs to have immediate adjacency to auditorium and code check. Pause, stop right here. This is a pretty important moment as you're solving these questions, because you could continue to keep reading, like second requirement, third requirement, and you're not really getting anything from that, because what happens is that you read the entire question first, then you go and try to figure out what the graphic is about, and then you go back into like really reading carefully what the question is about. So you can see that there's a lot of time, I don't want to say wasted, but it sort of is. So after step number 1, we do not read requirement number 2. We go straight into the graphic and see what we can do knowing just that one requirement. So we are looking for auditorium in this auditorium, coat check, and foyer. And as we were looking at this graphic during our first step, we realized, oh, there is auditorium there. It has immediate adjacency to stage and to another bubble. So we go back into the requirement, and it says that foyer needs to have immediate adjacency to the auditorium and coat check. So this is immediately telling us that foyer is going to come here. And then what did we say about coat check? It's going to follow the foyer. So coat check is going to come here. So now, before moving on to the requirement number 2, let's try to figure out what else we can resolve in here, because quite a few things opened up. So if foyer is here, coat check is here, we have restrooms there, chances are that this here is going to be a lobby. And then this is going to be green room, no, workshop, no. Main entry, yes. So we can already see that here we're dealing front of the house environment. So one thing that is missing here is going to be box office. Yep, let's go with that. So you can see how much of this problem we can resolve by not even reading the whole thing, which saves us a bunch of time. So now that we're sure that there isn't really a whole lot more that we can do with what we have so far, we go back into question number 2, requirement number 2, sorry. It says, workshop does not need to have immediate adjacency to stage. So the wording of this is not necessarily something that you would see on NCARB. I kind of tried to make it a little harder for you because you just kind of have to be ready for whatever. But knowing what we just read, we go back to the graphic and look for stage. Stage is here, and we can see that stage has immediate adjacencies to all the other bubbles except for one, which is the one that we're talking about. That's workshop, so that means workshop is going to go here. If workshop is here, then chances are that this here is going to be loading dock. And then we are left with the 2 rooms, green room and storage. And green room is an area, a room that is used by actors or performers on stage. And usually it is really close to stage and dressing rooms, which means that green room is going to go here, and then we're left with storage. That's going to go here. So, boom, we're done. Easy peasy. Our second bubble diagram is seemingly graphically a little bit simpler than the previous one, but we're not going to judge this book by its cover. We're going to take a closer look at it. We can see again there's a decent number of empty bubbles. There's a lobby, kitchen, okay, some restrooms, okay. And then on the left, we have a list of rooms, and it's sort of hard to say what this project is about. Like we were able to tell previously that it was a theater right away, but let's dive into the question, shall we? It says, an architect is hired to work on a community center project. Client's requirements are as following. 1. Storage needs to have immediate adjacency to event space. So, see, this one is quite a bit harder than the previous one because both storage and event space are not really shown in here. So again, this is probably a little harder than what you will see on the test, but the main principle remains the same of going back and forth between the written part and the graphic part, and just kind of getting your mindset used to such way of thinking and thinking quickly about what is going on here. So it sounds like after reading requirement number 1, there isn't really a whole lot that we can do here. But that's still not a reason to panic. We just move on to the requirement number 2. It says offices need to have immediate adjacency to a lobby and event space. Okay, so here we do have a lobby here. So this is going to be a big clue. So to go back, offices need to have immediate adjacency to a lobby and event space. So we're looking at rooms that have immediate adjacency to lobby. So we have one bubble here that has immediate adjacency with it, and then another not immediate adjacency. We have one space here that has a bunch of immediate adjacencies, and we have one bubble that has immediate adjacency to only 2 rooms, and one of them is lobby. So chances are that this here is going to be our offices. So let's start cracking this. Okay, so if we have offices here, that means that event space is going to go here, right? Okay, now we can actually go back to requirement number 1 and see what this will tell us. Storage needs to have immediate adjacency to event space. Okay, this means that storage is going to go here. Storage, boom. And then what's left, we can pretty much resolve on our own by just kind of looking at the numbers and locating them on the diagram. So we have here main entry is going to be going here, which makes sense, I hope. Then lobby, code check, yes, that makes sense too. Back of house entry, event space, or back of house entry doesn't need to be immediately adjacent to lobby, so let's put it here, and then, oops, what did I do there? There we go. And then we are left with classrooms that are gonna go here, and we're done. So I wanted to use this example to show you that sometimes the order of these requirements can be used to make you panic or not. Because if you think about it, if we had requirement number 2 listed as requirement number 1, we would have been able to kind of start cracking it much sooner. But since requirement number 1 pretty much told us nothing, like, we could be like very tempted to start panicking and be like, oh my god, I'm running out of time, and how am I going to do this? I don't know what they're asking, and blah blah blah. But if you can just kind of keep your cool and keep going back and forth, not necessarily just kind of focusing on one thing and then the other, that will get you pretty far. So now we're going to be moving on to adjacency matrix. This puzzle question is not necessarily similar to other ones because it's not quite that it has the graphic part and the written part. It's mostly graphic, but I included it here because this type of questions can still take up some of your valuable time during the test. So I thought it's still a good practice to look at them. I don't know about you, but I'm not embarrassed to say that it took me quite a while to figure out how to read these matrices. But once I did, I was almost embarrassed. But it's okay. The way it goes is you're looking to see where the rooms meet diagonally, and that's where you drop the symbol. And the symbols are usually immediate adjacency required or immediate adjacency not quite required. So if we were to look at if we were to drop a symbol that would illustrate the relationship between storage and event space, for instance, you would be kind of looking like this. I mean, at least this is kind of how I do it. And then like this. This is how they relate. And then the field that you want to drop your symbol in is this one here. That's kind of how I learned to read it. So, in this case, this adjacency matrix is going to be looking at the previous bubble diagram that we just looked at. It's saying, based on the bubble diagram 2, architect is developing adjacency matrix. Solve the matrix for main entry, event space, and kitchen. So it's not quite asking us to fill the entire thing. So let's do it. So for main entry, event space, and kitchen. Okay. So let's look at this. Main entry is not required to have immediate adjacency to lobby, and that's the only room that it's connected to. So we're going to be taking this guy. Yeah, I guess I should be going back and forth here. We're going to be taking that guy, copy pasting it, and it's going to be lobby, main entry, right there. Is that right? Yep, that's right. Okay, then we're going to have event space and kitchen. So let's see. Event space and kitchen. Let's do kitchen first. It's a little simpler. So kitchen has immediate adjacency to event space. So let's do that one. Kitchen, event space. Okay, it's right there. Okay. And then not immediate adjacency to back of house entry. Whoops. So kitchen, back of house entry is right here. Okay. And the last one is storage. Okay. And it's the same one. And storage is right here. And kitchen here. Okay. So there's that. And then we're left with event space. So event space is going to have required adjacency to offices. And you can see what I'm doing here, how I'm going back and forth. I'm not really trying to remember too much. I'm just kind of go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So we're looking to connect offices and event space like that. Then we're going to have kitchen that's already covered, event space, storage. Again, required adjacency, event space, storage, right there. Okay. Lobby. Again, the same type of adjacency. Okay, lobby is here. Is that right? The lobby, kitchen, no. Nope, right here. Okay. It's a little harder on the computer like this. And then, but I'm not making excuses. Anyway, and then the last one that event space is connected to is classrooms, and it's not required immediate adjacency. Okay. Okay. So event space, classrooms. Is that right? Yeah, that should be right. So there's your adjacency matrix. Down. So our next question is going to be about phasing. And I'm not sure about you, but I personally don't have a lot of practical experience with phasing. So these questions always catch me a little bit off guard. But I think with practice, you can get pretty good at them because, unlike the previous questions, they are not really going to require a ton of going back and forth. But there is still some things that you have to be watchful of, but generally speaking, they will require a lot of common sense, I guess. So, again, just like previously, we're going to be looking at the graphic part first. And normally, these phasing questions are going to have before and after piece in it. So, you want to focus on what is different about them. So let's see here. Things that really stand out is that this collector street moved up, parking also moved up, and then this expansion of courtyard happened. And then if we dive into what happened with the buildings, we can see 4, 6. Okay, so this one grew by 2 stories. And then this one here, 4, 4 remained the same. And then this 2 stories got changed to a dining hall. So, and then on the left we have numbers. So, okay. I think we have a pretty good understanding of what's going on. Now we can actually dive into the written part. It says, a medium-sized university is renovating southern end of their campus. This is completely irrelevant. I mean, normally these questions will have a lot of sort of junk in them just to kind of use your time or make your brain preoccupied with things that don't really matter a whole lot. So let's continue. They are updating buildings, increasing walkability, and adding a small dining hall. Okay. University hired an architect to plan out the phasing of their endeavors. Their requirement is that traffic and activities and services can continue with minimal or no disturbance during construction. So this is pretty much one requirement that we are given here, but it's enough of a clue to give us a direction of what our main goal is here. And then it says drag the numbers from the left onto the after diagram, suggesting the sequence of construction works. Okay, so usually moving a collector street is a pretty big deal, or anything that's traffic related is going to be a big deal. So you want to do that first. So let's drag that here. And then pretty much in practice, in real life, almost at the same time, parking will move like that. So now what we are left with is that now we have this empty space. All this is empty, right? But that's going to work well for us because we need to bring all the building construction infrastructure here. So you don't want to be polishing this up and landscaping it before your building construction is done. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to come back to the buildings and actually see what's going on. So we saw that this one here grew by 2 stories, and then this is 4 and 4 remains the same, and we can tell that these 2 stories pretty much went up here, and that empty space opened an area, a space for a dining hall. So let's translate that into numbers. So number 3 is going to go here because these 2 stories are going to go on top of these 4. And then this dining hall is going to move in to the space that was left by like beds, dormitories, right? So now we completed traffic, we completed building construction, and what's left is landscaping. And as you can see, landscaping is sort of divided into 2 components. One, and we have 2 numbers left. So one is pedestrian access only. So it's sort of a promenade that perhaps, we don't know, that ties this little area with the rest of the campus. And then we have this courtyard that engages both buildings. So if you think about the 2, you want to do the courtyard first and then the promenade, because if you do the promenade first, you still kind of have to deal with the landscaping work, and we don't know how much dirt and mess that can create. So I would put number 5 for courtyard, and then just like you would put a bow on a present, we would put this promenade there and make sure that it's all nice and pretty. So yeah, that's all for this one. So our next question is going to be again related to phasing. This one, as you can see from these graphics, is different, has a different scale. The previous one was dealing with university campus, was dealing with multiple buildings and traffic and landscaping. And this one looks a little more compact. Again, before reading the actual question, we're going to actually look for the differences between what happened before and what happened after the building, after construction. So we can see in the before, we have empty lot that gets occupied by parking. And then we can see that generally the entire building kind of stretched onto what used to be parking, and everything kind of grew. And these you can see that these classrooms changed their location, and then this seminar was added. So, oh, and then also another difference is that these concessions changed into kitchen. So I think that's enough to get into the question. A small dance school got bought by an event production company. The company is planning further expansions. The company hired an architect to plan out phasing of their project. The intent is that majority of the activities inside the building can continue with minimal or no disturbance during construction. So this is the same as what we saw earlier. Drag the numbers from the left onto the after diagram, suggesting the sequence of construction works. So now we're going back onto what we just talked about and start illustrating those differences, translating them into the numbers. So again, we can see that again we're going to be starting with elements that are related to cars, because nothing of this can grow with parking being here. So first thing is going to be parking is going to be moving into this empty lot. So let's drag number 1 here. Now, having this area free, we can start stretching and moving and adjusting all that's left inside of the building. So first thing that we can do after opening this space is kind of like establish that building boundary onto it. So, and we can see that classroom from this corner moved onto this almost diagonal corner. So that's going to help us to establish that boundary, establish where that exterior envelope is going to be. So let's drag number 2 here. Now, once we moved classroom from here to there, that opened up the space for mechanical room to grow. So let's fill that in with mechanical. Okay. And then moving mechanical to what used to be classroom opened up space for expanding the restrooms. So let's put number 4 here. So now once we have this corner set up, this area set up, let's start filling out what's left. We can see that entry is the same, lobby is the same, offices pretty much stays the same. But we have this new room, new piece of program called seminar. So I'm going to be putting that there. And then with the similar, because by putting this here, we're going to sort of connect this piece of envelope there in between offices and these classrooms that we just moved previously. But following the same logic, we are going to expand storage, and we're going to be expanding studio. And you can see that we sort of enclosed this event space already, but let's not put number 8 there because we don't really have this kitchen set up. So, because ideally you want this kitchen to serve event space, you don't want these concessions to serve the event space. So I will put number 8 onto kitchen, and then number 9 onto event space. So in a sense, like this event space almost acts as that large courtyard from the previous question. But this is really how I see it, how I think that it should be. If you have different interpretation, please let me know. I would love to hear it. Okay. So after phasing, we are going to transition into floor planning. In this case here, we have something that looks like a relatively simple floor plan. We have a classroom, another classroom, toddlers. This means we might be dealing with a daycare or something. Kitchen, counter, whatever that means, an office. If we start paying attention to the hierarchy and relationship with the exterior wall, which is also important, we can see that this is the largest classroom, has a nice amount of glazing. Then this one is sort of in between, has a nice amount of glazing towards the east. This one is the smallest of these similar purpose spaces. And then these are sort of clustered together in that area. And then on the left, we have a list of spaces. We have office, studio, kitchen, storage, conference room. So it sounds like what's going to happen here is that we're going to be dragging things and replacing these room names with these room names on the left. But let's see. A developer is turning a daycare building into shared office and studio space. She signed long-term lease with her future tenants. These are her original requirements. Large shared office space, 600 feet, open plan with workbenches. Pause right there. Don't keep moving forward. This means it's going to be 600 square feet. If you just glance through it, that's the largest number of all. So that means that large shared office space is going to go here, even though this classroom is larger than what they're requiring. This is the closest that we can get, right? And that's completely fine for this level. And now we go back. It says studio for 2 visual artists, 550. Early morning light is desired. So this is pretty straightforward because we see a bunch of glazing here. Even though this is 495, it is like 55 square feet smaller than required, but that's the closest that we can get. We do give them that early morning light because we have a nice amount of glazing towards the east, so that should be good. Then studio for a game developer, 300 square feet. Looks like the closest thing is this, toddlers. So let's put this room here. Now we have workroom, kitchen, 160. Well, we already have a kitchen here that probably has all the infrastructure in there, even though it's quite a bit bigger than what we need by like 40 square feet. That should be okay. Because I think the key about this one is that this kitchen here already has like a fridge, sink, range, and all that stuff. And even though I don't know, maybe this office would come closer to required square footage, just the fact that like all these appliances and things that already exist in this kitchen would really qualify this space to satisfy this requirement for the kitchen, because just moving that would cause a lot of pain and would cost a lot of money. And now we're left with storage and conference room. Now if we go back and see here what the requirements say, they say general storage 160 square feet. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to be walking through storage to get into the conference room, despite the fact that this space here has 2 windows, has like more glazing. In this situation, it makes sense to walk through the conference room into the storage, because that storage is going to sort of be small, but also square footage is close enough. And then to confirm it, this conference room here is 200 square feet and we have 208, so that makes sense. I completely agree and understand that it's not an ideal situation programmatically to be going through the conference room into the storage, but numbers wise, this makes the most sense. And also we are satisfying these requirements for the light, for open plan, so that's good. Now usually once you assign all of these spaces and drag the room names to the right places, you want to take another quick look at the requirements just to make sure that you didn't do something that is contradicting or is generally opposite of what these are asking. So large shared office space, okay, because see, they're getting much more space than they need, but that's fine. Early morning light, okay, that makes sense. That's also makes sense compared to these other numbers. So kitchen stays there, and then we explain and went through this. So to me, this is what makes sense, and I hope you will agree. So next question that we have is going to be again a floor planning question. This time, what it looks like is going to happen is that we're going to be dragging entire rooms onto the plan. So let's kind of take a look at it. It looks like an open floor plan with a core here. We can see something that looks like an elevator core, and I'm assuming this is going to be like a stair shaft. And then we have restrooms here, and it looks like we have an open office situation and something that looks like a reception desk and a small lobby of sort, or lounge. So, and then we can see that north is pointing to the right, which means east is going to be down, south is going to be left, and west is going to be up. I'm kind of making it a little harder for you, but this is nothing really to freak out about. Now, in terms of glazing exposure, we can kind of see, if we kind of go clockwise from here, this kind of makes sense to be solid, and then this corner is glassy, a little bit more glass here, which is nice. And then all of this eastern wall has only one window, so all this is solid. And then south exposure, most of it is going to be gone to this open office, but there is still some windows left here in this corner. And then in this corner here, we actually have 2 windows, and actually 3 windows in this corner. And then here we have 2 windows in this corner, and then another smaller window in there. So having that in mind, let's take a quick pass at the list here. Okay, conference room, presidents, VPs, office manager, VR room, library, and kitchen. I don't know about you, but some things are already starting to work in my head. And the point is that you also kind of start understanding that president's office, that here we're actually talking about hierarchy. So you will want to keep the president's office, that's going to be pretty much the second largest on the list, kind of in the corner with the like a glassy corner. So my assumption is that it's going to go somewhere here, but let's not kind of go into that before we actually read the question. So let's see what it says. A small tech company purchased one floor in a high-rise building and is looking to organize their layout. In addition to the reception area and open office, which is, we already saw that, they need large conference room. Okay, it's not really telling us anything much about it. President's office, southern exposure. Okay, so let's pause right there because we are given a nice clue here, because it says southern exposure, which means that this president's office is going to be along this wall, and we already talked about that glassy corner, so let's drag that into the glassy corner right there. Okay, now vice president's office near president's office. So, I mean, if you look at the amount of area here and here, the chances are that they're going to be right next to each other like that. Okay. Next, we go back. It says office manager's office, northern exposure. So here we have northern exposure, which means either here, because this is north, or like somewhere here. Now, if you look at the amount of space that you're given here, and like here and here, this is really telling you that it should go here, because if you put it in this corner or somewhere here, you're gonna sort of mess up the flow of that corner, that space. So everything is sort of telling me that this office manager space needs to go here. And again, I'm probably giving you fewer clues here than what you would see on the exam, but the way of thinking is essentially the same. So now, without moving forward, let's kind of assess what we have here. Now, we just kind of looked at this corner here, and we didn't put office manager there, but if you just look at the sheer size of this conference room, it really makes sense to put it here. And actually, if you test it, it kind of really fits. So that makes a lot of sense. Then we have VR room. It's not really telling us anything about it or any requirement, so we can't really put it anywhere just yet. No panic, just move forward. It says library should have daylight. Okay, that means that the library is either going to go here or here. It's not really giving us what type of exposure from like what side, but that's okay. We still kind of have two options, but not enough clues. And then the last line that we have, it says kitchen should have daylight across restrooms. Okay, so it's telling us that kitchen needs to be across restrooms. So let's sort of put that here, like that-ish. And now if we do that, we can see that these two spaces sort of open themselves up. So we can put library here in the corner, like that. And then this VR room is going to be in the dark, and nothing there in the requirements mention that it needs to have some sort of daylight in. So here we are. We sort of have a diagram for a floor plan. It looks believable to me. Again, before we move forward, you sort of quickly glance through the requirements again. Large conference room, yes, it makes sense. President's office, southern exposure there, that makes sense. Because it has 3 windows instead of 1, it's pretty obvious. Office manager's office, northern exposure, yes. Another corner office. No, that was VP's office. Then office manager, next to it with northern exposure, it's a small office. VR room, nothing really is given about it. Small room there, doesn't have daylight. Then library has daylight, kitchen has daylight, and it's across restroom, so we should be good, right? Cool. So after we looked at the floor planning, we're going to move on to site planning. We're going to zoom out a little bit. This type of questions will employ your understanding of some requirements for sustainability, for solar exposures, how your building drives with the topography, with other site components. So this is something that you should be really comfortable with, because that's going to be really important when it comes to solving site planning puzzle questions. But again, similar to before, we're going to be looking at the graphic component and be going back and forth between the requirements and the actual diagram. So in this situation here, we have something that looks like there is a lake, and you would assume that at the lake is the lowest point at the site. And then here we have a peak. So we have some sort of a slope going down. We have a bunch of coniferous trees, a couple of deciduous trees, and we have a road going through, and it's more or less following the topo lines. And we have north pointing down, which means south is going to be up. Now, I think that's pretty much all that we can gather from observing this before actually looking at the question. So let's see. Developer is investing in a retirement home for 200 facility users and 40 employees. Architect is asked to recommend best location per following parameters. Site is located near Roanoke, Virginia. Okay, so this is telling us here that we are dealing with temperate climate. I think on the test, it would probably just spell out what climate you're in, but I mean, you can always be ready for whatever. So we know that that's not really gonna help us eliminate any options here, but let's keep moving forward. Number 2, building should have year-long view of lake. Okay, so this here is a pretty big clue, and we already said that south is going up, and the lake is on the south. So if we kind of start looking at how the topo lines flow, we can see, and you kind of want to start looking for open spaces with not a lot of grade change. Now here I would identify 3 areas. I would be looking at this peak here, I would be looking at this flattish area here, and I would probably be looking at here. But since we are in a temperate climate, I will immediately cross out that peak, because that's not good for a temperate climate. Also, you want to cross out this flat area here, because you don't ever really want to put your building to run north-south. And you can see that topos sort of run north-south here, so that's no-no. So sort of we are kind of left with this and this. And let's see if the last requirement is going to help us eliminate one of the 2. It says, developer wants to minimize development impact fees. Okay, so here the question kind of brings something else into the play, but essentially what this translates into is that the site should be closer to the road. And out of these 2, it's pretty easy to conclude that this is the site. So this goes away. So this is the site, and it says click on location that satisfies all requirements. So you pretty much click here anywhere and you should be good, because actually closer to somewhere here, because you want to make sure that you provide this year-long view of lake. because if you kind of put it behind these deciduous trees, that means that you will still be hiding the view in the spring and summer and a bit of fall. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You want to keep closer to the road so that you don't really have to spend a bunch of money for branching the road into there and covering all the utilities and everything else that falls into the development impact fees category. So yeah, pretty easy, right? And the last question that we're going to be looking at is again site planning related. In this case, it looks like we have a site that again has a body of water. This time we have a river. We have north pointing up, which is the most traditional way of doing it. We have two roads. We have some coniferous trees that keep their leaves year long, and deciduous trees that lose leaves in the fall and have no leaves in the winter. Another thing that we can see is just kind of pay attention to how the topo lines work. And we can sort of see that the topography kind of created these pockets that that are already big enough of clues that are telling us that some program is going to be happening there. Okay, so that's it about the plan itself. Now on the left, we're going to see main house, parking, plaza, and cabins. So the chances are that we're going to be dragging them onto the site plan itself. But before we assume too much, let's read the question. A small Moravian church community near Winston-Salem, North Carolina, is looking to develop a community complex consisting of following elements. Main house for communal events overlooking river throughout the year. Pause. Let's look into that. So we have this main house that we identified before, and let's lock this layer for a second. Oh, not that. There we go. And let's place that onto a site plan. It needs to be overlooking river throughout the year, so it's not quite going to be here. I think two possibilities are here and here, but if you consider the fact that we are in the northern hemisphere and you ideally, if you can, you want to tilt your building a little bit towards east, about 15-ish degrees or so due east, you kind of want to ideally do something like this. And you can see that this topography here allows you to do that better than this topography in this pocket. So my vote would go to this location here. So that's sort of why, and you indeed provide that view of the river. Next one, we go back into the requirement. Parking for 70 cars with restricted visibility of the main house. Okay, so you don't want to see the house from the parking, and that's why these trees are here. So let's put parking there. And one thing that I would certainly recommend you doing is looking at the NCARB demo exam, where you will actually learn how to rotate these things, because rotating is pretty important when it comes to the test, because it's so easy to kind of overlook it or think it doesn't exist, but it very much does. And on the test, you want to align all your elements, put them in line, like put them parallel to the topo lines. And the way you rotate on the exam is you right click and then click rotate, and then it will give you an angle that you need, and you pretty much kind of through trial and error figure out what is the angle that works for you. Okay, next thing is welcoming plaza, semi-restricted view of river during summer. So if this is the main house, it sort of makes sense to put plaza right here. So let's do that. Like that. And then indeed we have semi-restricted view of the river during summer. So, because like you can see it a little bit here, but not entirely. So that's good. And then 5 cabins to accommodate summer camp goers, year-long unobstructed view of river. Well, we have 4 of them, so that's okay. But the place that's left is that pocket that we were looking at before, and my illustrator is acting out a little bit, but let's put them here. And actually, if you look at it, we can, just because this mass is distributed a little bit better than this massing house, it's just like one big block, we can actually do a little bit of a tilt towards the east to make it better for getting the solar exposure, right? And then before we call it done, again, you can kind of look through the requirements, make sure that everything is okay, and yeah, that's pretty much it. You're done. So yeah, we just went through 9 questions together. This cat was not with us the whole time, but I really hope you found this set of questions helpful and that you will feel less intimidated on the test when it comes to these type of questions. Just remember to look at the graphic part first, just to get a brief understanding. You don't need to know anything right away before you actually dive into reading the actual question. And other than that, well, I really wish you best of luck. Let me know if you have any other questions that are or comments that are related to this specific set or anything else. I would really love to hear from you and see if I can help you. Okay? Thank you. Bye.